Welcome, everyone, to the 2021 GPFF Lives Online conversation. Today, we are speaking with filmmaker and activist Casper Wong. My name is Kelly Devine. I'm the artistic director. Nina Strike, the executive director, and I are so delighted to have you join us and tune in to these conversations. Please be sure to check our website, peacefilmfest.org, to learn more as the September Film Festival approaches, September 20th through the 26th. And now let's join in conversation with filmmaker activist Casper Wong. Hello, Casper. How are you today?
Well, thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Nina. I want to thank you again for giving me this opportunity to talk about my work.
Oh, it's our pleasure and it's our honor to have you with us. And one of the things I wanted to start with is that even though I have been with the Global Peace Film Festival since 2006, our relationship extends much further back. In fact, it extends to your very first film project, Shirts and Skins. And I at that time, I was at the Independent Film Channel. Part of my job was looking for new talent. And in doing so, I went to the film showcases for all of the film schools in New York and was sent links and tapes of those in other places. And your film really caught my eye. And when you and I connected, I just knew there was going to be a deep friendship because of the quality of person that you are. And there's a fascinating story about that film and what it means to you in your life.
Wow, that takes us back about 20 years. Well, I'm so glad we crossed paths with Shirts and Skins. But the story actually started a little bit before that when I was a full-time lawyer. I was practicing law with IBM, and this is the very heady days in the 1990s when they were still the largest computer company in the world. And in fact, we rolled out one of the very first corporate diversity programs in the country. A very smooth rollout. And it was my first job out of law school. And as a young attorney, I think I was really on the path. I was in a great place to learn a lot about the computer business. But I think what really caught my attention during that period of time is this rollout, this diversity program. And of course, I never had time to go. It's like, who wants to go to one of those? It did not seem very meaningful to me at the time, but I had to go with all the senior management. And I had a very profound experience standing like the protagonist in the film under an Asian sign. And I was the only Asian manager in the whole meeting. And I felt like I had to keep speaking for myself and my people because there's so little known about me. And if we roll the time back to that period in history, I don't remember any films or television series on Asians, right? So it was a very uncomfortable experience. And just about the same time, there was the shooting of an unarmed Chinese American man in Sonoma County, not far from Silicon Valley where I was. And it was a very profound experience when I learned about his killing, and nothing happened. Nothing happened to his killer, which was a cop. And so these two events kind of converged for me. And I really sat in my office for a long time and wondered about the trajectory of my life as an attorney. A lot of soul searching. I remember this very well. I was sitting on the 19th floor of my very well appointed office in San Francisco, overlooking Market Street. and working on my first $1 billion deal. And I should feel a lot of excitement about that. But all I could think about was, wow, my invisibility is real. And then I maybe a little bit about my background. I grew up in New York with a hive of activists. I have an aunt who was the first Chinese American to run for city council in New York City. And she also started an organization, the Chinese American Planning Council. And I have a cousin who started the Chinatown Health Clinic. Now, both of these organizations are now over 40 years old in New York City. So they're both founders. And I have a big sister who founded AFS, Asian American Financial Society. Anyway, so in different fields, I grew up with that kind of talk in my living room, stuffed envelopes. So it started when I was a child. And so all of those elements kind of converged in that moment on my 19th floor office. And then I decided to apply to film school. I was a creative child, and but immigrant family, we were kind of steered away from going into the arts. But I applied to film school that year after the shooting and attending the diversity meeting. And when I got in, it was a true dare. Like, are you going to chuck all of this for this? And I found myself wanting to go. And I made that story, those two events, and I kind of merged it into the Shirts and Skin story.
Would it be fair then to say that you stepping into that family tradition of activism was that step you had taken to film school?
I think so. I didn't know it then. But it seemed natural for me to, yes, it was my own act of activism and advocacy, but I just didn't know. Again, my first degree was in engineering, so I never studied arts. And I didn't think I would be you don't know, I didn't know, but I was a very creative child, loved to paint and draw and write. But again, it's really taking that personal step, isn't it? That giant leap to think that I can do it and I can make a difference and I can help us be visible and have our narratives be told. And so Shirts and Skins really was just that, right? It was the convergence of all my personal experiences to that point.
Can you just say a little bit about the film?
Sure.
What it's about.
It's a zany day in a diversity workshop where Anne is my alter ego. She's a lawyer for this corporation, and Michael is an engineer, kind of nerdy engineer, and they both end up under the same label that is Asian. And where Anne she doesn't feel like she belongs. It's like I'm not him. She was going to turn around and join the women's group, but then she was kind of asked to be with him, and she really did not take it seriously at all. She was very uncomfortable under that label to be associated with this guy. She thought she had anything common with, and then throughout the evening, as events happened, she come to terms. I guess I don't want to give the ending away, but she comes to terms with or her own awakening on her identity. So
And what was so powerful to, as I remember just trying to think back to when I had first seen the film, what was so powerful about it was how well you captured the complexities of that awakening, right? Because we don't just simply have one identity, even to ourselves, right? But we certainly have identities that are imposed upon us that sometimes we try to live up to, other times we try and push away. and you really captured, um, you know, the just to repeat that word, the complexity of it, because it's not really as cut and dry sometimes as critics would want you to think, that this kind of exploration and this kind of cultural conversation really is, right? It's not about just being a label. It's about the fullness and messiness of being a human.
That's precisely what we are struggling with when your narrative is missing. And with every piece of, you're looking at me, I mean, I'm talking to people with this rash of anti-Asian violence. You know, to you, I am a filmmaker, we have a history, we're friends. To someone else, as I'm standing on a subway platform, they're calling up on whatever stereotypes or whatever images they have been exposed to. They may or may not have an Asian friend. So yeah, the complexity of life, the complexity of our identity is really kind of distilled into just a caricature when I'm standing on a subway platform, when there's no other narratives about me. And I think with Shirts and Skins, yeah, I think maybe it was my own unease at IBM. When I tell people I work for IBM, more often than not, they assume I'm a programmer, right? No, I'm your lawyer, and you're going to. So it's all through the optics, as we call it nowadays, right? Of how, and my family story. I mean, how much of my family story did my fellow managers know about? Whereas I grew up with a history of knowing certain types of stories, right? I'm exposed. I watch TV, I watch movies. I know a lot about their lives, but they knew very little about mine. And so with the complexity, I think it was weaving in several narratives with Michael, who is a new immigrant, versus Anne, who is a lawyer, and she kind of dissociates with him, from him. So yeah, and even just a label of Asian Americans. We are Chinese Americans, we're Cambodians, we are Indians, we're, my goodness, I mean, yeah.
There are myriad identities and ethnicities and languages and cultural backgrounds, and I think I know one of the things that I try to do in my own personal life is to not be defensive when I get something wrong, because we all are limited in our frames of how we encounter one another. But I think one of the things that being a part of this work, I try to bring into my own personal life, is that when I get something wrong, to be glad to be corrected, and to use it as a learning opportunity, not to feel as though someone was telling me I'm bad or I'm wrong. But it's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to embrace.
Absolutely, and it's not just each other, but even within the Asian American community, and that's Shirts and Skins, even within the experience of two Asian Americans, they are so vastly different, and they kept reading each other wrong throughout this story, right? Until the very end,
Right.
where you know, with again, with the shooting in Sonoma County, I at that point in time, shootings by police were limited with the Asian American community. And again, the defense for the cop was he was worried that he was a ninja fighter, that he knew Kung Fu. That was his defense. Now, I think that speaks volumes to what we expose to and what we project, right?
Right.
And at that time, there was very little representation of the Asian American or Asian community at all, besides in, you know, Bruce Lee.
Exactly. And so I struggle with that. I do believe that it's difficult to be in the arm, to be a police. I mean, you're called to a situation and you're trying to defuse it. But that's where I found the representation and our invisibility have real life consequences. So yeah, and I think that was again, going back, that was my awakening to perception. And I can keep on that path that I was on, which is a fairly comfortable life as an attorney. Or, well, if I don't feel like I can make that change, if I don't feel like, and of course, this is the 90s with a lot of hubris in Silicon Valley, a lot of talk about do what you love. And I took that leap because I figured if I cannot do it, if I do not feel like I can make that leap, who can risk? I had a cushion. I mean, who can risk that kind of, your livelihood to do something that, well, there were no women directors when I started that I can name. One, maybe one. Christine Choi and Renee Tajima, who made Who Killed Vincent Chen, and which I did see, and it did inform my, I guess, my decision back then. But that was it. And when I got into NYU Film School, being told I was brave and courageous for having made that decision, I didn't know how. And there's a lot of naivete on my part, at that point. I think I chalk it up to naivete. I really thought I could do it. I can change it, and I can put more images that are accurate, authentic, and to tell these stories.
Well, and I remember having you up to my boss's office across from Penn Station and having such an amazing conversation with you about all the creative ideas that were just spilling out of you, the animation, this, you just had so many things that you were just bursting to want to share and work on. And so it's been such a joy to watch you over these years. And then not all of that work that you did fit the film festival, which I became a part of in 2006. But Lulu Sessions, that was a really another kind of milestone, if you will, in terms of your journey as an activist, as your journey even as a healer in this case. And Nina, do you want to talk a little bit about what we set up at the festival for that film, Lulu Sessions?
Well, when we asked Casper if we could show the film in the festival, and we were exploring ways that we could engage our audiences actively in from films that they saw. And Casper, at the same time, and Casper, you'll talk about this, I hope, was looking to do an individual and group engagement project with not with the Lulu Sessions, the film per se, but with the ideas that came out of it and the catharsis that that it was offering to audiences. So we worked together to come up with a way to bring that to our audiences and to bring our audiences to that engagement. So Casper, if you could start by just describing the film, the Lulu Sessions, briefly, and then talk about how that evolved into your idea for the Peace Pod project.
Of course. The Lulu Sessions was my first feature documentary film. And that was a result of something that happened. So I went to film school and life happened. My best friend, my ex something, Lulu, a larger than life cancer researcher, a fairly well-known cancer researcher, was dying of cancer herself. And she was only 42 at the time. And I found myself cutting classes, jetting up to Burlington, where she was in Vermont. And I filmed her. And I think at that point, she was already in stage 4 breast cancer. And I was hoarding film, basically. I was hoarding a lot of memories. I found myself, she passed exactly 20 years ago. I found myself left with 60 hours of footage, and I'm in film school. I wanted to write sci-fis and animations, but I have sitting on the other side, there's these 60 hours, and what am I going to do with it? It took me about 10 years. So my film actually premiered 10 years ago. It took me that long to cut a film, and I realized that it was a very difficult film to make. As much as I was talking about, oh, tell your stories, tell your narratives, but when it's real life and it's just as messy as we were saying, it's complicated, it's messy. And then I realized that she was a teacher to me, ultimately. She was not only a professor in medical school, but she taught me a lot of lessons about life and death, and certainly love. And as I was undertaking the process of editing this film, I thought it would be pretty straightforward. But then I realized that in our story, there were actually kind of messy. We were never really together. Why? Oh, you mean I need to tell you why? So I realized that she struggled with alcoholism, and we were never together. And so there were a lot of unfinished business that I realized before her dying. And it dawned on me that we had a chance. In her last year of life, I spent the most time with her. And we resolved a lot of the things that we struggled with while she was living. And I said, wow, how precious was that to have that time with her? And we were able to tackle some of the very difficult questions about our relationship, about life. And she made it a little bit better for me, less fearful of dying. And I thought, wow, I have something here that I really would love to share, that it could be done. I knew, and I still know, so many of my friends who are estranged from their family, fathers, mother, children. And I said, wow, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be, well, we don't have the language for forgiveness or reconciliation. We're children. We just don't know. We don't like to tackle it because it's hard. And I realized that if she had died from a car accident and I never saw her again, I would have felt differently about all those years with her. And then I realized I had a gift, and which evolved into the Peace Pod. I said, how wonderful it would be that everybody's given a place, a dedicated space to talk about and deal with these issues with someone that's important to them. I'm not talking about everyone. And I think there's a bell curve. I think there will be some people that you just will never be at peace with, and you will have to make peace with that too. But there are some people in the middle. If they can have a tool, if they have seen how it's done, if they see how people struggle with issues and how they can resolve them, I think it would enrich both their lives. That was the hypothesis anyway, as a scientist at heart. So I tested out for myself, and I said, wow, that was wonderful that I was given that time with her. And it was wonderful working with you, Nina, and Kelly in the festival to develop that idea further. And it was wonderful to have that setup. I think is perfect, because I had different connotations about what the Peace Pod would be like when I first conceived it. I thought I would have really unique architecture. It's almost like a StoryCorps type, but really have it all around the world, perhaps in different manifestation, what people think of as peace, or a sanctuary where two people can come together with goodwill to achieve some kind of peace with each other. But having worked with some of the people who watched the Lulu session, so the Lulu sessions basically became an inspiration from a very personal story. I would love for more people to have that experience. But over time, I wanted it to become a repository for these stories. When you see how it's done, once, twice, three, we get an idea, because we don't have real life examples of how it's done, what words are said, how do you approach it, are both parties ready? So it was wonderful to have an opportunity to do that, and we've collected many, and I have continued to collect them at places, at festivals. Just 2 years ago, I was in San Francisco with CAM, the Center for Asian American Media. They were screening Lulu Sessions as part of with the Imagine End of Life Festival.
Mhm.
And I got more stories. So it got launched with you at the Global Peace. And I feel like I can continue to do that. And it's the same setup. And they're so heartfelt, and tears come like within minutes. And that tells me that that's an underserved community. We don't have opportunities for people to express, to be vulnerable for a minute, to allow you to hit that space where you would like to meet someone for reconciliation or for forgiveness, because it's so easy to be distracted with everything else, right? So.
Yeah, there are not a lot of cultural incentives in the US to be vulnerable. There are many more incentives to win, to be tough, to be, on top, instead of extending that hand and reaching out to one another. But I certainly do remember, how we set it up was, in the theater where the screening, off to the side there was cameras, and I think maybe a little screen
A
that was
background, yeah.
anyone. After we did the Q&A, you invited people one by one who were interested to come down and share, to talk to the camera. Could you explain how you wanted them to talk to the camera?
Sure. It was after the screening, and I said that was my own peace pod. I didn't know it then, but it was a prototype. It took a while. And I said, until we can ramp it up to where it's two parties coming together, is there something that you would like to express to someone today that you have not had an opportunity to say? And let's say if you have just another 3 months to live, or, so there's some urgency. And what was really wonderful was there were a lot of young people that stepped up, and they want to talk to their dad. They want to say this to their mom who just passed. And there's a lot of pent up, again, the word peace, and I think in your festival as well, peace, what is that? You define peace for many different ways. We talk about world peace over the holidays, but I remember one Christmas, I can count in one hand, like how many people do not have an estranged relationship. I mean, it's just people around me. I mean, luckily, I feel like I was able to kind of take the bull by its horn. But I do think it's very uncomfortable. And why now if it's not urgent? And so you hear, and I think from learning from Lulu, when time is short, you're much bolder. You're like, just get it out, just say it. And you feel, well, time is short. So the urgency, and you achieve a certain level of boldness in yourself that you don't think you could achieve otherwise. And so I felt a little bit of that energy after the screening in the younger audience. And again, the tears are quick to come, because it's just almost as if they've been waiting for an opportunity for someone to just even ask them to say, what is the one thing that you would love to get off your chest? So it's a very powerful experience for me to have that almost come into fruition. It's not quite there as we imagined. And also I'm deploying it in the VR, right? I've been working on VR, virtual reality. And over time, certainly for people in hospice, I also did a string of interviews with hospice patients. That the ones that are on the websites are from hospice. They feel the urgency and they're so ready to speak. And they want to. And I think as a species, met with climate change and all those things, there is an accelerated feel for us to, it's almost like an invitation for people to be bold, to just go and say those things already and have that peace in your life while you can still enjoy it.
Yeah, I do really, thank you for taking that leap with us. It was definitely at that moment was not the typical post-screening discussion.
Mhm.
And I remember so many people coming away, as you said, wiping away tears, but they seemed revitalized by having
Mhm.
had that release. So I really want to thank you, and that's why I said this was a step in you becoming a healer, because
Well,
you really did help a lot of those folks who throughout the festival came back and told us.
it turns out the act of summoning up your courage to do that is healing in itself. And maybe I'm just a conduit. I mean, I felt like I was healed in one relationship at least. And I love that. It's good for your health. I mean, research has been done about forgiveness and the health benefits. But I thought it was a great partnership with you during that piece. And we also did some near the library. I remember nearby. Anyway, so I think there were many opportunities that we gathered stories, and I would love to be able to continue to do that. I think it's something that I want to grow with the project when I'm focused on it again. But
Well, we
yeah.
are always here for you to
And
discuss.
we're totally open.
Thank you. Thank you.
Open to continuing to develop that with you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So just moving on, because we should wrap this up pretty soon. Talk a little bit about your activist work and what you're doing with New York Women in Film and Television and with the Asian American Women Media Makers.
Well, I took on this journey of wanting to do something in media and making ourselves visible and our stories told. I realized that it is pretty much a steep uphill climb. That has been my experience. I think there's strength in numbers, and I'm still at a point where I think we're gathering momentum as a community. But when I started the Asian Women Media Makers, it was in 2012, and I thought, out of the global population, by definition, there's got to be a lot of Asian women. Where are we? Where are our stories? Again, I feel like I really miss them as a child. And with that organization, I basically gather the people that I run into at film festivals. And we have a fairly strong network. It started in my little shoebox apartment. We meet for brunch every month. We've moved on to dim sum. So we, as a community, we can help each other. And with NIWIFT, I am their Asian board member, and we have been working on our response on the anti-Asian violence that's been going on. So I'm still looking for opportunities where we can get our stories told. And I think it takes effort from almost every segment, I think, of our industry, not just the CEOs. And I've seen it up close for big corporations, but middle managers, everyone along the chain who have the authority, who has the power to greenlight something that's out of your zone. But of course, we are also empowering ourselves, right? We're organizing ourselves so that we can tell our stories. So I realized that over time, I'm still very committed to that decision that I made a very long time ago.
Well, and that sort of brings us full circle back to Shirts and Skins. You've been so generous to make Shirts and Skins available in our. There is a promo code. People
Mhm.
can go to Vimeo and look up Shirts and Skins and put in stop AA PI hate in the promo code. And oh, there we have the. Uh, although I did want to ask you one last question, um, Casper, if Nina, if you could take, thank you. Um, you know, with Shirts and Skins, the reason why it feels like it's come full circle is that, you know, as people watch the film, what's the thing you would like them to take away in terms of an inspiration for their own lives? Because that's really a central part of our mission in our festival is to it is to inspire people through the arts to, you know, make their lives and the lives in their community more peaceful, more just. Um, so what would you like to say to people as they embark upon watching Shirts and Skins all these years later?
Well, be curious. Be curious. Be open. I think with if you can go into any new situation and film and familiar situation and be curious and open instead of using all the preconceived notions you have about something, maybe you'll walk away with something new. And I think that's what happened to Anne. And I think I'm continuing to learn new things because of that.
That's a wonderful note to end on. And thank you so much, Casper.
Thank you, Kelly.
It's always such a pleasure to talk with you. And thank you, everyone who has watched this installment of our Glows. As I said, you can go to Vimeo and watch Shirts and Skins using the promo code Stop AAPI Hate. Please check out her websites for the Peace Pod Project and also her OO Studio or OO Media, so that you can see all of the different projects she has worked on and that is working on, as well as please do be sure to check out our website, peacefilmfest.org, to make sure that you are up to date on all the information about our upcoming film festival in September. Remember, we will have programming all in between now and September. And we thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon at our next Glow.